Hi, everybody. My name's Lila, and today we're going to talk about trade. So, trade is a really important thing in and of itself. It's multiple different, major topics within the curriculum. I don't remember how many exactly, but they talk about it so much. So, I figure we have to at least make one video on it if we don't make another, which I don't think we will, right? Not another video on it. So to start it off, one of the first major trade routes was the Indian Ocean Basin trade. So, Indian Ocean Basin trade. Indian Ocean Basin trade is just trade that was within the Indian Ocean, and if you don't know where that is, you probably should by now, but it's the ocean surrounding India. It's above the Southern Ocean. If you don't know that there is a Southern Ocean, I don't have high hopes for the future of the world. But Indian Ocean Basin trade made island nations accessible to large trade routes. For example, what is now Indonesia and what is now the Philippines were able to interact with extremely prominent countries such as India and Egypt and any part of Dar al-Islam. But in order to efficiently travel these trade routes, there had to be a great level of knowledge from sailors and merchants about monsoon winds. Monsoon winds are just like when is the winds going in which direction. And before the lateen sail, an extremely important invention from Dar al-Islam, you couldn't go any way except for where the wind was taking you, um, which is where the saying "I'll go where the wind takes me" comes from. Um, it just pretty much monsoon winds were pretty much just like, oh, what time of year can I go in what direction? I don't remember what it is exactly, but I believe fall is like east north and spring is like southwest. I'm not sure, but I might be wrong. Fact check me. And sails, also extremely important ways to help travel the Indian Ocean. The largest, most important kind of sail would be the lateen sail. It's a small-ish triangle-shaped sail. Small-ish in relativeness to the other sails on boats, not relative to me. They're a lot larger than me. That triangle shape that can take wind in any direction, from any direction, and put you in whatever direction you wish. It made traveling all oceans, not just the Indian Ocean, um, much more accessible and easier. It allowed you to go different directions and definitely the way you wanted to go, as opposed to the way the wind wanted you to go. Other forms of technology developed. Oh, I clicked a button. I unclicked the button, and we're good. Um, Other forms of technology developed include the astrolabe, star maps, and other star stuff. Before the time of compasses and GPSs and Google Maps, which I rely on heavily because I barely know the name of the road I live on. Star maps labeling where the stars are in the sky relative to where you are. For constellations are a big deal. Everyone knows they're a big deal. Well, I'm not an astrologist myself. I'm not into astrology. People think they have something to do. Some people think that they have something to do, that your star signs have a lot to do with your personality type. I'm off topic and I know it. Another important invention from this time is the compass. I'm pretty sure, I hope everyone here knows what a compass is, but you just flick the piece of metal and it spins on a magnet, and when it's done spinning, it points you north, which is important. Um, and that's kind of like over water. In terms of over land, we have the Silk Roads which spans Afro-Eurasia, but mostly Afro-Asia, which is Africa and Asia, stretching from east to west in what I would consider Southern Asia, like middle Southern Asia. You know what I mean? Like, it's not in Russia. Russia is North Asia, pretty much, but it's underneath that, kind of along the Himalayan mountains, all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah. It goes west east, like I said, connects Asia to modern day Saudi Arabia, and then does span across North Africa, but we'll talk about the African trade routes in a minute. It traded lots of things, goods, ideas. Very important that ideas were traded. Religions, specifically in terms of ideas. Goods, one of the most. It's named after Chinese silk, which was made after having silkworms fed mulberry leaves. But after that secret got out, it wasn't really that big of a deal. Um, but other extremely important goods were traded, like teas, gunpowder. Very important. Gunpowder, porcelain, and do I have another one on here? I don't have anything else on here. But obviously these roads stretching millions, thousands of miles. I wouldn't. It's, I don't know. I don't think it's millions. I think it's just thousands, thousands of miles. Uh, there obviously were quite a bit few bandits. People would steal things, kill people. Typical. I'm on the road in the middle of nowhere and I don't have any guns on me, kind of stuff. Until the Mongols came along and took care of everything. They protected the roads. Oh, it's just 4,000 miles of roads, roughly 4,000 miles long in terms of how long the roads were. Um, the Mongols came along and they kind of like were like, "Hey guys, we're gonna police this." So there were a lot less bandits. My world teacher, Mr. Drummond, actually said, "You said that somebody else said this is hearsay." Um, that you could walk across the whole length of the roads with a gold plate on your head and you wouldn't be touched during the time of Mongol rule. Going back to Africa, the Saharan trade routes, but sub-Saharan specifically, trans-Saharan, not sub-Saharan. Why am I saying sub-Saharan? Trans-Saharan means going over top of the Sahara Desert. It was made possible with the usage of camels from the Arabian Peninsula, and one very specific traveler named Ibn Battuta. This guy was a big deal, but we talk about him in a lot. You talk about him a lot, really. Um, he traveled across the Sahara Desert with the goal of reaching the kingdom of Mali in a place called Timbuktu. There's room to be lots and lots of gold, and he was right. There was lots and lots of gold. Some important developments in terms of land-based trade routes were horse stirrups, camels, um, and the camel saddle, and of course carriages and all that sort of stuff. Um, but those were all like pre-imperialism. They, of course, continued to exist, but post-imperialistic trade is also an important topic that needs to be breached. It becomes more and more complicated. Um, in my personal opinion, there were two main like trade routes or like exchanges that kind of happen that heavily impact the rest of the world, like a lot. Lots of heavy impacts. One is the Columbian Exchange, which was not a trade route, but just more of an like I said, exchange of products and ideas, and illnesses. The Columbian Exchange includes moving things like turkey and pumpkins and cocoa and what was the other one? Potatoes from the Americas to Europe, pretty much just Europe because they were the ones that were imperializing everything. Um, and like diseases such as smallpox and influenza, as well as goods, pretty much all manufactured goods and all sorts of languages to the Americas, uh, killed lots and lots of Native Americans. There was no technology traded along this route, with the exception of things Europeans brought with the intention of just giving them to other Europeans. As I said, smallpox specifically killed a very large portion of the Native American population, which was being used as like slaves for the plantations that the Europeans were creating in the Americas with the intention of great profit. So when they all of the Native Americans died, they turned to the warring tribes of Africa to get out their people, which starts the transatlantic slave trade or the triangle trade. I've heard it called both ways. I've always called it transatlantic slave trade, but someone asked me the other day what I was talking about. So I will clarify, they're essentially the same thing. Even though I personally believe it isn't really a triangle because there's multiple different stops in multiple different areas. It's kind of a very oblong polygon. um, so, stemming from the need for more slaves in the American plantations, sailors from Europe would travel to western coastal um, cities and kingdoms in Africa, and they would take war prisoners from these. They would buy them from these people for slaves, and they would buy them for manufactured goods like gold, rum, tobacco, all sorts of that, all that kind of stuff. Um, a lot of these traders were Portuguese, as they controlled a lot of that. But there obviously were other people. Just Portugal was a big deal in that trade. Sorry. These slaves that these bought tribal Africans, war prisoners, would be put onto boats that were designed to just carry hundreds of slaves. The horrible conditions known as the Middle Passage across the Atlantic Ocean to the Americas, up the coast, around the coast of South America. I'd call it northern. I'd say mostly northern South America, but it does go along the whole thing. Um, and there they sell slaves for raw materials. Then they go up to the Caribbean. They sell slaves mostly for sugar, but just all sorts of raw materials. They go up to the American colony, um, English colony, I guess, south, or just American South, and then they'd move up the American East Coast to the American North, where they didn't really sell as many slaves, but they did get a lot of rum. A lot of rum was produced in the America in Northern America. What they did sell there, what they got from the Americas was largely lumber, fish, and other unmanufactured, unprocessed goods. All of these unprocessed, non-manufactured goods are then sailed from the Americas over to England to become manufactured. They sell them on the unmanufactured goods for the manufactured goods. Then those manufactured goods from England are taken down to Africa to start the whole thing all over again. I can see where they get triangle if you just generalize all of the Americas, but personally, I wouldn't call it that. Let's rinse and repeat. Here we go. But that's kind of it for the triangle trade, transatlantic Atlantic coast slave, post-imperialism. Trade happened a lot, pretty much everywhere. We have a video on imperialism. Highly recommend. Very important for you to watch. And then Afro-Eurasia obviously traded with each other as well. Everyone traded with everyone. Post-imperialism, post the discovery of the Americas, and Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. Very important. Honestly, I would say that's an important year to remember, but I don't think you'll have to cite it anywhere. Very few very important years, but I'd say that's a big deal. The Europeans did trade specifically with China. The trade with China was important because China resisted imperialism by creating spheres of influence where they allowed European control in like a small area or in like one city. And obviously Europe didn't appreciate this. They were like, we want to take over your whole country. So they started, and there was very few things that China was willing to accept from the Europeans in return for all of their goods. China exported mostly teas, porcelain, and some silks still. But all they wanted from Europeans was silver, specifically English silver. Even though they didn't typically, well, that's what they wanted. They wanted silver, and they were like, "Hey, we want our silver too. Why don't you want any of the other stuff we have?" They're like, "We have our own stuff. No thanks." Um, so which eventually caused the Opium Wars, which was England feeding all of the Chinese people opium and getting them addicted to opium. And then there was a whole other thing, a war with China, lots of fighting, yada yada yada. Nobody likes anyone. Kind of no more spheres of influence. You guys suck. You ruined it for everyone, England. Staying over there in the East Asia, we have Japan. Japan actually originally did a little bit of trade with Europe, but then they were like, no, we're gonna back off, continue with our Meiji Restoration. and like, no, we're good. I don't really want to talk to any of you. We're good. We're gonna keep our little Meiji Restoration over here, which, if you don't know, the Meiji Restoration was a redevelopment of Japanese culture in, and the development of an industrialized society. It was honestly a really important, really, really cool thing, named after the leader emperor leader. I don't know if he was an emperor or not. Leader Meiji. But I think that's pretty much it.
What about India
Oh, India got colonized.
and Africa?
Pretty much all of Africa was colonized. So I consider them to be part of, at the time at least, their European leader and overlords. Part of their European overlords. Sorry, I needed a drink, but I think that's just about it. Trade obviously does change with the development of new technologies like planes and trains and more powerful cargo ships and steamboats and all sorts of things. Trade's very important and different today, but I think those are the only times where you ever actually have to talk about trade as it changes. It's not really talked about in the 20th and 21st century. All right, later.